for the Rider Dynasty podcast. Let's go!
This is the Ride or Dynasty podcast, and I am your host, JJ Wenner. Now, tonight's topic is busting out, and no, we are not going to talk about how none of my work pants fit me anymore. And we are not going to discuss Katy Perry's famous appearance on SNL's Bronx Beat in her little Elmo t-shirt. Anybody see that? No? Oh,
yes,
Google
sir.
it. YouTube it. That's fantastic. Fantastic. We're going to discuss which rookies we think are the most likely to bust in the NFL. Who is going to be the Laquan Treadwell, the Peter Warrick, the Ryan Leaf of the 2020 draft class. Now, tonight is an all-hands pod. I blew the Rider Dynasty conch, and the whole crew assembled. Ryan is here from the Misty Mountains, smoking who knows what. Eric and Don trudged here from the Shire, and fresh off a long day of work in the mines of Moria, Michael Kloss. Say friend and enter. How the heck are you, Michael?
Good. Like a hobbit, I've just been eating, late breakfast, second lunch, last supper, all those things.
11sies?
Yeah, just adding on for the winter.
That's awesome. We are so happy to have you back with us. I know you've been trudging away while a lot of us are just at home working. Now, Ryan, tell the good people where they can find us.
You can find us on Twitter at Rider Dynasty, at our website, riderdynasty.com, and you can listen to our podcast wherever podcasts can be heard.
Absolutely. Now, before we get started, rather than saying hello to everybody, I just want to jump in right away and go to the news. All right, Josh Gordon is applying for reinstatement. I feel like this is Groundhog Day. Michael?
Not to be too long here, but Josh Gordon's had his conversations with mental health and, been suspended by the league like 5 times or, for substance abuse. But, as I get older, it's interesting, you kind of frame things differently. So anything that is going to help him get back on the right track, get to a good mental state, if football is a part of that, I am all for it. He might continually keep falling out, but anything we can do just to, raise people up instead of, denying them any help they need, even if that's football, I'm gonna trend in that direction.
I give it by week 12, he's suspended again.
Week 12, okay, that's very generous. Mike, I just want to give you a hug, Michael. I really do. I wish you were here.
I'll accept a virtual hug.
Yeah, that's because you're my cam boy.
You're so warm.
That's because I've been gaining weight. So the Dolphins are receiving calls about Josh Rosen. Now, I don't think they're prank calls, but what do you think about that, Ryan?
I think it makes sense to me. He's going to be the number 3 quarterback on Miami's roster, so in other words, he's expendable to them. But he's young and still might have some upside as a former top 10 pick. And at the very least, he could be a serviceable backup to a team that needs one. Like, say, the Seahawks, who don't have a backup right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, didn't they draft... Who's the kid who they drafted as a UDFA? I guess that's not drafting. They're UDFA out of...
Oh, Washington State. Anthony Gordon.
Yeah. What was that kid's name?
Oh, Anthony Gordon?
Yeah, Anthony Gordon's there.
Well, look at me. Screwing up already.
Well, I think Josh Rosen can handle a UDFA. Wow. I don't know. He's been pretty rough, but I would hope he can handle a UDFA.
We all thought Royce Freeman could do that too.
Yeah, true.
I just love to see the kid get an actual opportunity in a stable situation with a team that's a little more developed and not trying to burn it down around themselves to maximize draft capital.
Yeah, you mean not stand in front of a firing line and ask the kid to dodge like bullets? I mean, that kid was really thrown into the fire. I hope he gets a shot, but twice. That sucks. The Seahawks have reached out to Devonta Freeman, Eric's favorite, and Carlos Hyde, Eric's other favorite. Eric, any thoughts?
I'm not too worried. I think they are more of a threat to Chris Carson than they would have been to, or would be, to Miles Sanders, who we talked about in the last episode. But until they actually sign, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think teams are just kicking the tires and seeing if they can bring somebody in cheap.
Which they should.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess Rashad Penny's isn't as healthy as he should be, so they're thinking of filling the gap between that stud running back coming back to the backfield.
Oof. You don't want to have to call Marshawn Lynch again.
Oh, dear God. No. Okay, now the biggest news of the week, the NFL is thinking about implementing a new onside kick alternative. Teams would get the ball at the 25 and face a 4th and 15 to keep the ball. Don, what are your thoughts?
So let's kind of take a minute here and do a deeper dive into this whole deal. First of all, the proposal this time around has an anti-cheating rule in it and an anti-manipulation rule that says you can do it no more than twice per game. So you have to strategically implement this and not just say, we're just never going to go with the onside kick again, and this is going to be how it is. So you can't do it all the time. Twice maximum. If we look back in NFL history to see just how effective the onside kick was, prior to 2017, onside kicks were succeeding at approximately 20%. It's a little lower. It's probably around more like a 19.3%. In 2018, as part of the safety implementation and the look at concussions and trying to minimize collisions, what they did was they implemented a rule saying that the kickoff team was not allowed to leave their stances, so they couldn't advance to the ball until after it had been struck on an onside kick. They also did some things with changing the way that teams were allowed to align and the number of players on either side of the ball. Those changes caused the success of onside kicks to absolutely dump. In 2018, it went down to 8%, and in 2019, up until the November point in 2019, it was at 6%. So the rule change kind of made things a little better in terms of player safety, which we all want, of course. But it kind of ruined the effectiveness of the opportunity for those teams to get back into a game or to affect a close game. If we take a look at fourth down success in the 4th and 15 or longer area, last year and in the last 2 years, that success rate was between 16.8% and up to closer to 20 if you include defensive pass interference penalties and added yards that way. So realistically, the proposal would bring this opportunity back in line with the original the original onside kick percentage.
Yeah. So I guess my concern, Don, and you kind of said it, are penalties. On an onside kick, all you have to worry about are lining up offsides for the receiving team. That's it. Now, with this new idea, you bring refs back into the equation. I don't want refs in the equation because it's going to end badly. Pass interference, defensive holding, face masks, et cetera, et cetera. You are going to overcomplicate this, and it's going to put games at risk, the outcomes at risk over a BS penalty. I mean, they already took away the defensive pass interference review because the referees basically revolted and said, we're not going to overturn any bad PI call. So, no thank you. Just line up, kick it. It's not supposed to happen that often. Who cares?
Yeah, it's really not supposed to happen that often. And in fact, there's a rule in here and the clause in here saying no more than twice per game to make sure that it doesn't come up that often because they don't want it to be a major part of the game. I like anything that involves an extra element of strategy, and I like anything that gives a team that's close an opportunity to catch up. And I think what happened was the 2018 rule change kind of negated the opportunity onside kick to help you catch up. So I think this puts it back in play.
I just think I want refs to have less to do with the outcomes of games, and I think this is going to put them more in charge. Anybody else have any thoughts on this?
My immediate thought, as soon as I saw this, was that the Chiefs just became even more terrifying. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about that too until Don said that they could only do it twice a game. I was like, the Chiefs might never give the ball to the opposing team. Just keep going for it over and over. All right.
It makes football more exciting.
Yeah, I think it's.
Yes, so you're for it?
Yeah, I think it'll make things interesting.
Son of a bitch, I'm outnumbered again. Every goddamn time. It's okay. It's okay.
So how do you feel about that trend? What does that tell you?
It tells me that I'm on a pod with a bunch of wrong ass people. But I do my best to educate y'all every day, just like my 7th graders and soon to be 8th graders. It's my job.
Yeah, that X went off on Family Feud, and Steve Harvey's looking at you like you are not a smart man right now.
He's doing that little look to the audience, like the little straightening of his tie, checking his buttons. Yeah, I'm with you. All right, well, that was good for the news. Now on to our main segment. Now, as some of you might know, I run a the Future Fantasy Leaders of America Club at my middle school. Now, my friend Don here is a senior advisor of that club. We have been having our weekly meetings via Zoom, and every week we have a topic of discussion. This past week, we discussed which rookies we thought would be busts. Now, to help the discussion, I broke them up using the ADP from the Fantasy Football Engineer, just to break them into tiers. And then everybody had to pick who they thought was going to bust. That's it. Pretty simple. Now, to prepare, I thought I would just post the survey on Twitter and let some people weigh in. I got a ton of responses, both on Twitter and from some of my league's message boards. Now, they all asked for the results, so I thought, hey, why don't we talk about it on the pod? And then I can publish an article after the pod comes out, giving everybody the results of the survey. So, the ADP is for a 1 QB league. So we're not talking about Superflex, 1 QB. I'm going to tell the players in the tier, and then the podmates are going to take turns picking who they think are going to bust. They have not seen the results of the survey. Okay? So I'm going to try to be as informative as possible, guiding it. But so the basic premise is you have to pick who you think is going to be Laquan Treadwell. All right? Do we got that?
Shots fired.
We're good.
Shots fired. I drafted him early, man. Listen, I'm there. All right. First tier. Tier 2, Jonathan Taylor and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Ryan, you have an incredible heart for CEH. So I'm going to let you go first here.
Well, for the record, I don't think either one of these guys is going to be a bust. But since I'm being forced into picking a bust, I'm going to go Taylor here. 18 fumbles in 3 years. 15 of them were lost. I've seen players benched for less than that.
David Wilson.
That's a great example. And this might seem kind of but Taylor came right out of the gates as a 2,000-yard rusher, and he stayed that level all through college, which makes me think he is maxed out as an athlete. So I'm curious to see where his ceiling is in the NFL, because if he's maxed out athletically, what if he comes into the NFL and he's a 900-yard rusher? There's nothing wrong with that, but is that tier 1? Sure, he got better, or he was more utilized in the passing game as a junior, but
Yeah, you're making me rethink a lot of stuff here, and I don't like that, Ryan. So you're cut off. Michael, your thoughts?
All right. again, we kind of had this conversation before. It wasn't mentioned yet. We're calling the definition of a bust not just this year. This is a Dynasty podcast, so it might take a couple years to fan out before we can take this one out of the archives and replay it to see if we were right. But come on, Ryan, what are you doing? Like, Jonathan Taylor is not going to be a bust. I think he's in a great situation. He was, exactly, rode out of the gate pretty hard, but I don't see why that would be a misnomer in a good offense to kind of call that a bust. By the opposite side of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he popped out for 1 year, right, in which you get a chance to have a historic year with Joe Burrow. So even if you look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire in a really, really good offense, I'm with so many weapons, I'm would be more pointed to say you're looking at a Colts team that would ground and pound and use him a lot more often than a Chiefs team that has a bevy of weapons to pick from, right? You have to have for him to actually be your first round pick. And again, I don't want to call him a bust, but being forced to choose, I would go Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because if you're looking at Pat Mahomes, maybe he might want to dump it. Sure, like that, he made Damian Williams relevant for the end of 2018, but he didn't exactly have the greatest season this year, as you always like to point out to me. So
Yes, we do.
I would still have to go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire as the bust, having only shown that he can do it on literally a historic team.
Andy
All right,
thinks CEH is better than Brian Westbrook. That's all I have to say.
Now, Brian Westbrook, the receiver on the Redskins or the running back on the Eagles?
The running back on the Eagles.
Just want to make sure. Just double checking. All right.
That's a hard one to do, going and picking apart your 1-2 in most rookie drafts.
And just before you guys continue, I messed up. And I checked with my son, who is a data scientist, and he looked at me disapprovingly when I told him what I did. And he said, well, you should have given him the option to pick none of the above. Otherwise, it's not a true choice. And I said, I hate you, and you make me very sad.
Yeah, making people probably, who had the first and second pick sad is not what we're going for. But again, given the choice that we had, we came up with arguments.
And I will say that of the people who responded, CEH was the loser. More people chose him to be the bust than Jonathan Taylor, which is odd because CEH is also ahead in ADP. So let's look at Tier 2. Tier 2 is a little bit deeper. In Tier 2, we have the next 3 running backs and the 2 wide receivers. So we have, in order of ADP, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, CeeDee Lamb, and Jerry Jeudy. Eric, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm kind of torn between the 2 running backs here. I think DeAndre Swift may disappoint people a little bit more, or is more likely to disappoint in that offense, because I think he'll have a harder time becoming the workhorse back with Kerryon Johnson still there. I don't think the Lions really want to commit to one running back. Both Matt Patricia and their general manager have made comments about how important having multiple backs is. But that being said, I think Cam Akers is a little bit riskier than the rest of these prospects. I just don't think he's on the same tier, definitely not the same level as CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy. He does have a good situation, but I don't think he was really a special prospect. He's a quality athlete, but he was pretty hit or miss on a lot of things on tape, I think. I think he was hit or miss as a pass protector. I know some people love him there, but he also had some really bad reps. He was pretty hit or miss on his vision. He likes to dance around and break things to the outside. Everybody's excuse for him is always, well, he played behind a terrible offensive line, and that's true. But at some point, I think he needs to show some more special traits, and he just doesn't do that as often as DeAndre Swift.
Well done. Don, thoughts?
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I have Akers as of the most likely to bust of the running backs in this tier as well. 5-star athlete coming out of high school, highly recruited, but just took 3 years of absolute getting beat behind a really poor Florida State offensive line. Had to bounce everything to the outside. Yeah, he could use his speed that way too, but never really developed the quality vision and capabilities of running inside. To go for another vein here and to pick another player in the category that could possibly bust, I'm looking at Jerry Jeudy here. We got a thin guy, slight build, who had the yips with drops, several bouts of which through his college time at the University of Alabama. He's coming into a Denver situation in which, yeah, he's going to get lots of reps and he's going to be looked to a lot. However, he's got a very inexperienced quarterback in one Drew Lock, and really just a lot of hope. So I see some possibility here that those drops, if they become chronic, could get into his head, reduce his reps, considering the other weapons around in Denver, and kind of lose the eye of a young quarterback who might lose faith quickly.
Well done, gentlemen. So as far as the survey goes, Akers received the second worst score of any tier. He was selected as the most likely to bust. Second place was Jerry Jeudy. Now, Jerry Jeudy was only a little bit above average in the bust selection, but it was interesting to me to see those two as the choices. Now, managers were very confident in Lamb and Dobbins. Both of those were among the best scores received. People do not think that Lamb and Dobbins are going to bust. So keep that in mind. This is good data to use in your leagues. All right, let's look at the third tier. Now, these players are Justin Jefferson, Jalen Reagor, Keyshawn Vaughn, and Henry Ruggs. Now, I know somebody here has a little love for Henry Ruggs, so I'm going to let Eric go first.
I do have a little bit of love for Henry Ruggs. I think he's the first receiver off the board, which is huge. I wouldn't take him over Lamb and Jeudy, but he's walking into a great situation. And I think people are a little too quick to assume that he's not going to be running the intermediate routes for the Raiders. He did do that at Alabama. That said, to stay on topic here, my most likely pick to bust from this group has to be Keyshawn Vaughn. The other three players in this tier are first-round wide receivers. So it's kind of crazy to me that Vaughn is thrown into the same tier and going in the same pick range. The commitment from his team is not there. He's not walking into a guaranteed top situation. By comparison, he has Ronald Jones to contend with, who I'm not a big Ronald Jones fan, but we can't just dismiss him, whereas these other players are probably walking into a locked-in day one starting role.
All right, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. If you look at Justin Jefferson, right, he's going to fill a void that Stephon Diggs left. I'm not comparing him to it. It's just he has all the opportunity in the world, and I don't think that I could pick him. Jalen Reagor, you're fighting a couple of wide receivers that just could not, even being on the field, just couldn't convert in the poor setup of wide receiver that the Eagles had. And then Henry Ruggs as the first wide receiver off the board. You don't take a wide receiver that high and not use him. So, I mean, I think Chucky's crazy, but I don't know that he's that crazy. Mayock is at least a little bit better. With Keyshawn Vaughn, you're right. It's that he just jumps into a situation, especially with an older quarterback, that he might have some success if he pops out in 2020. But what happens when Brady's gone? Like, is that team still going to be the team that you think? Plus, you still have to, use those two wide receivers. You start messing with contracts. I just think that that's not, again, having to pick. Keyshawn Vaughn stands out as the clear bust in this category.
It seems like he's completely a bet on situation over talent. That he's clearly not as talented a prospect as these other three guys, but that situation is, one, very short term, and two, not really as clear as the situation really is for these other three guys. So I don't get it.
I mean, he's a great athlete. He was like a high school player of the year in Tennessee and Gatorade player of the year there. Played at Illinois and Vanderbilt. But you're right. Like, compared to the pedigree of the other players in this category, he sits at fourth.
Yeah, and I think you also have to remember, besides Ronald Jones, you also have Dare there. I'm not going to try to say his last name because it's like saying Tua's or Albert O's last name. But Dare is a decent receiving back who showed up last year. He's also been the only back who's been at Tom Brady's little throwing sessions. Tom Brady likes who he likes. You know what I mean? Like, he loved James White. It didn't matter who they drafted. That's the guy he threw to. So now looking at this, Keyshawn Vaughn was by far the worst player
In that tier?
considered as to be a bust. No, in any tier.
Wow.
Any tier. Akers scored using like stats. He scored a .92 CV, which was the second worst. Vaughn was a 1.42. So he was 50% worse than Cam Akers at number 2. So this is like your runaway hit. This is like Titanic bad. Nobody believes in him, which is very, very shocking.
Nobody knows what's going to happen with that run game in Tampa Bay just yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's up in the air.
And Bruce Arians has been noted for getting himself away from the running game.
It's definitely going to be interesting. But out of this tier, Vaughn was easily the least player who people were confident in. Justin Jefferson and Rager were both very, very believed in by the voters. So keep that in mind. Now let's look at the fourth tier. The fourth tier, we see our first quarterback. We see Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Denzel Mims, Michael Pittman, and Brandon Ayuk. Now, these are the players who will be selected at the end of the first and into the beginning of the second round in most of your drafts. Now, depending on your personal preference and roster depth, this may still be too early to take a quarterback for some people, but the wide receivers in this tier were selected anywhere from pick 25, Brandon Ayuk, to 59, Denzel Mims. They were the bookends. So where are we at, Ryan?
From this group, I'm going to go with Brandon Ayuk.
Ow!
Oof.
Boo!
He's
Boo this man.
He's a one-year wonder. And I'm also skeptical of Arizona State products. Do you guys remember Jalen Strawn? Like, he was supposed to be pretty good, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
He went up to the Texans, right?
Yeah, and he got drafted in the third round, which is exactly where I thought Ayuk should have been drafted. But yeah, he went late first. Despite that, I thought Mims, Higgins, and Pittman were all better players. Plus, Ayuk's going to be the third or fourth option at best on his team, whereas Pittman and Mims step right into large roles. I can't say the same for Higgins, of course, in Cincy, but when I watch Ayuk on film, I just don't see a 1,000-yard receiver in the NFL, which is what you want out of a first-round pick. I see a guy that get you 700, 800, especially in San Francisco. I mean, this is a team that likes to run the ball a lot. Their number one receiver is their tight end. I don't even...
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I don't like what you're saying, much like earlier. So it's hurting my feelings that you don't like Ayuk. That hurts me. Don, please come out and say that you didn't pick Ayuk.
I did not pick Ayuk. In fact, I like Ayuk. Last week we had Jake Fromm in our Circus Freak category. This week we can talk about Ayuk in the Circus Freak category, but no tiny hands here. Now we have giant arms. A ridiculous catch radius for a fellow of his height. It's unbelievable. The guy's probably scratching his kneecaps in a standing position. It's crazy. And that's what you want in a fast wide receiver, a huge catch radius, especially with a quarterback who might be inaccurate. So I think this guy has a potential to really be something there in the San Francisco offense. My bust, I'm going T. Higgins, a guy who's never had better than a 17% target share in any season in college. It's crazy. Dude digs the long ball, but here's the rub. He's not that fast. He's got long speed, but he's not sudden. He's kind of a slow off the line and really just kind of bullied some guys that weren't going to be NFL players. So here's a guy who hasn't run the whole route tree, doesn't have the speed, at least a short area quickness, to really run the whole route tree, and is going to a Cincinnati situation where he's already got to deal with an A.J. Green, probably, and more importantly, a Tyler Boyd, who I really like, for downfield opportunities out of the slot. And really what you have here is just a dude who's going to line up on the outside, try to get you some yards, and maybe a combat catch. So of the assembled, give me T. Higgins as my bust.
Wow. So much like T. Higgins, I love Emily Ratajkowski, but I am not fit nor wealthy. So kind of like T. Higgins loves going deep, but doesn't have the speed. That's interesting. So looking at this tier, I told you that we started with like the highest of the wide receivers was Brandon Ayuk at 25. The lowest was Mims at 59. Would you be surprised if I told you those players tied in votes for being the most bust worthy? It's kind of funny that they bookended. I didn't like seeing that considering some of the drafts I've had. Burrow came in as the safest. People are very confident in Burrow being a solid QB, but yeah, people don't like Ayuk and Mims equally.
Can we get a Jets fan's take on Mims?
I do not trust any player the Jets draft.
That's fair.
You know, and I hate saying it. Like I always hope for the best, but I know it's going to turn out bad. I don't believe in Mims. I think he's going to be a bust.
Spoken like
that was my
Jets
vote,
fan.
actually. That was, yeah. I mean, you know, once you get beaten down enough, like you just expect that to happen. Oh, Michael, you have something to say. What are you going to say?
I'm just interested, with Mims is he was one of those, I guess, Burrow-esque players of this year. Nobody really paid that close of attention to him unless you were watching, like straight. Well, he went to Baylor, right?
Correct.
Yeah, Baylor football,
Ugh.
right?
Ugh. Baylor wide receivers.
Yeah, it's one of those that surprised me a little bit, I think, but is the highest candidate for probably a bust, like Ryan said with Ayuk and how they kind of came on late. I don't know if that's just a product of NFL evaluators, putting the time in and bringing that name up. But as soon as Mims and Ayuk kind of caught fire, then they fell to where they're at. So yeah, interesting to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of analysts, like the guys who look at the numbers, they love early breakout age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they sure do.
Which is what everybody's kind of saying about Mims and Ayuk, is that where were they early?
One of the things I can go for and say with Mims, Baylor had such an unstable situation his entire career there. We had several coaching changes, controversy, lost scholarships. Really now they're finally starting to get back to what we would hope to be a quality program. However, their coach just up and left. So, yeah, we had a guy who didn't and wasn't asked to run the whole route tree, so that's a concern in a player like Mims. But you got somebody with the speed and the measurables to make up for it. So it may take him time. He's got a chance.
Very good. So, let's look at the fifth tier now. We have Tua Tagovailoa, Zach. Did I just say that right?
You did.
Winner.
Yeah, it's great. It's just great. Just pretend. Go with it.
But Ryan's laughing at me.
It was
Tua Tagovailoa.
It was fantastic, JJ.
I hate you all.
We just know how much you practice.
Zach Moss. I nailed Zach Moss. LaVisca
Say what now?
Chenault, A.J. Dillon, Brian Edwards, and Antonio Gibson. Those are in our fifth tier. Don, go ahead.
All right, tier 5. Here we go. We're getting into the point now where we're starting to look at some aspect of role player or your franchise quarterback. And I'm sorry for my buck. Tua's got the bust written all over him. I can't trust him. The skills are there. The head's there. The legs don't work. We've got a guy who falls apart. It's a shame. But 2 separate now high ankle surgeries, a hip that had to be repaired, and hasn't even set foot on an NFL field yet. Not 1 minute of in-person coaching. And here we are, coming out of college, banged up already. I just can't hand the keys over to him. I'm sorry. I love the intangibles. Dude's got leader written all over him. But I just don't have him having a long career because I just don't see a rather small quarterback just holding up.
Wow. I know this isn't a video pod, but this is my shocked face.
Don's just been crapping all over Ryan's Crimson Tide.
I know. Ryan's going into like an epileptic seizure over there. Okay. Wow. I don't even know what to say. Michael, help me.
Yeah, so let's look at these names again, right? I think Tua and LaVisca have injury concerns, right?
Substantial.
Antonio Gibson and A.J. Dillon are quote unquote buried on the depth chart right now. Zach Moss, really depending on what they want to do with Singletary, that's a tough offense to predict because Allen likes to run. He's not going to pass for probably more than 3,500 yards, so they are going to run the ball. So I kind of want to ease off Zach Moss on there because if he emerges, then he could be a stud. Brian Edwards also, is more of your big prototypical, like where Ruggs is. I'm not going to say a gadget player, but you can move him all over the field and get him the ball, and he's super fast. Just a really interesting option. I like Edwards there, so then I'm going to hone in, and I'm gonna put the injury concern away because I think Don, that's a perfect call, but I'm gonna just want to go a different direction. And I think I'm going to go with Antonio Gibson, just probably because I think a part of me thinks as far as ADP, I'm just guessing, but JJ, help me out here. He's probably the highest in ADP of this group. Plus
second to Tua.
Oh, second to Tua. Okay, gotcha. It is 1 QB, right?
Yep.
Just looking, I'm sorry, I'm just not excited about a Redskins projected third down back, right? He's a wide receiver most of his career, turned to running back in the last 2 years at Memphis. You don't see a whole lot of wide receivers converted to running back. Not that he can't do it. We've seen his tape. But all of those factors and then be a third down back on the Redskins. I know I'm not comparing to Chris Thompson either. I hate that, but if that's my frame of reference of what he's supposed to be, I don't want that. I just don't. I'll pass.
Yeah, I think you're right about Gibson, honestly. I think he's going to have a role pretty much from day one this year as a pass catcher and kind of gadget player. But he's very risky. He touched the ball 77 times in his entire career at Memphis.
77.
That's insane. And I mean, that's not even at, Memphis had a very good team this past year, and the last couple of years, but this isn't Alabama where he was, buried behind some 5-star running back,
Darrell Henderson, right?
Yeah, they've had good running backs. But to not get more than 77, it's a
total
risk.
Touches.
Yeah,
77
big
total touches.
It's the very definition of a flyer.
In his college career. 77.
Yeah. The upside's there, but you're asking a lot of development to happen.
So I will say, you guys are pretty on task. I mean, Moss won, in quotation marks. He lost this. He received 30% of the vote, which was the highest in this portion out of this tier. Gibson was second at 54. Now, Moss does not have the confidence of many managers, and much of the information we heard on Moss was about his poor combine juxtaposed with his great tape, right? His measurables were horrible, but he was good in games. Now, Gibson is kind of the opposite, right? He had a great combine, but he had 77 touches. I know we've said 77 touches a lot, but remember that freaking number.
Yeah,
That's
crazy.
not a lot of experience to come into the NFL.
If it wasn't a rule,
Right.
it's telling that he could wear the total number of college touches on his jersey.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Well, only if he was a lineman.
Like I said, if it wasn't a rule,
Oh, you did say that. You're right. I missed that part. So the rookies in this tier that had the most confidence from managers were Tua and Brian Edwards, which were the two most confident votes from the managers who did this poll. People believe in Tua. They believe in Brian Edwards. The Brian Edwards one surprises me because he was a great Devy pick 2 years ago. Then he faded. But he's making a resurgence, and I'm happy because I have
It's all the Ruggs haters out there.
Well, I think that breakout age too that people are talking about, and then you had the
Wasn't he 19 for his breakout?
it was something crazy, and then he hasn't had a combine or a pro day yet because of a broken foot, right?
Yeah, he had an ankle injury. I
So
thought.
people love the unknown.
Don't we all? All right, let's take a look at the sixth tier. Now we're getting into like a little bit of like dart throws, right? So the tier 6, now it finishes the second round. It takes us through the middle of the round 3 in your rookie drafts. We're introducing players selected on day 3 of the NFL draft. Now we all know that these players are inherently dart throws, which is why we as fantasy football players, as dynasty players, try to acquire as many first and second round picks as possible. Because at this point, we don't know. We're throwing darts. Now, in order of their ADP, tier 6 includes Anthony McFarland, Chase Claypool, Justin Herbert. It's not Herbert because he's not a goalie. Darrington Evans. You know how I feel. Joshua Kelly, and K to the J to the Hamler. Eric, I know you are a Penn State brainwashed fan, so I'll let you go first.
All right, well, to no one's surprise, KJ Hamler is not the most likely to bust in this tier, just in case anyone was wondering. The player I would go with here is Joshua Kelly. Just from a fantasy perspective, I think real life, I don't like Herbert, but I think the value at quarterback, he's a little lower risk kind of. Kelly, I think is going to struggle to get on the field in the first place. Obviously, Eckler is there and kind of locked into at least the passing down work, if not more. But Justin Jackson's also lurking, so he's got to get past him just to get into the early down work or get a piece of the early down work. And he wasn't really a running back that was on my radar very much going into the draft. I just don't think he had all that impressive tape. And that offense, I mentioned I'm not a big Herbert fan, not a huge Tyrod Taylor fan. I don't think that offense is going to be very good anyways, possibly for a couple of years. So I'm not sure he has a small chance at a small piece of a small pie. I'll put it that way.
There are no words that disappoint me more than saying a small piece of a small pie, because I've been eating a lot and I want a big pie, and my piece should at least be 25% of that pie.
Well, there you go.
At least.
Stay away from Joshua Kelly.
Okay, I'll stay away from Josh Kelly. Now I'm going to go to Ryan, and Ryan is going to shit all over my favorite player. Because he does. That's what Ryan does. We are juxtaposed to one another.
Maybe get new favorite
at our core.
Maybe get new favorite players.
Yeah,
you could
or
try
maybe
that.
get a new co-host. Maybe get a new Dynasty analyst who believes in me.
We've been trying. He just keeps coming back.
He does. He doesn't take the hint. Believe in who I believe in, Ryan. All right, Ryan. Who do you have in this group?
Justin Herbert's your favorite player?
Oh, no, he's not.
Color me surprised.
Are you going
Plot
with Justin
twist.
Herbert?
Yeah, I'm going with Justin Herbert here.
Woohoo!
Yeah, I found it difficult to even venture to call a 4th-round running back a bust, or a 3rd-round running back for that matter. Yeah, the player that I think is most likely to be a bust out of this tier is Justin Herbert. Just based on his draft capital alone, I wouldn't have spent a 2nd-round pick on the guy. I mean, he's Blake Bortles 2.0. He's just a big athletic prospect with a big arm and shaky decision-making, accuracy issues. He's Blake Bortles all over again. He was the same.
Yeah.
He was the same player from freshman year to senior year at Oregon. Like, he didn't improve whatsoever. He just, like, the same mistakes he was making as a freshman, he was making as a senior. Like, the accuracy never got better. I don't know. I don't see it.
I think that's a pretty spot on comparison. And you're right, the accuracy, I mean, at times it was kind of hit or miss where he'd make some impressive throws, but there were times where it was bad. And
Yeah,
you're right,
he's
it
just-
never got better.
He's just inconsistent, and I mean, I think he's going to get to the NFL as a player that's maxed out. Like, I don't see him having much more of a ceiling. Like, he doesn't know how to throw a touch on the ball. Like, he just whips everything from what I can see. I don't know. I see him settling in as an average at best quarterback. And yeah, I could see him being like Bortles in 5 years.
You had me at average. Now, my vote was for Hamler.
Oh,
Sorry, Eric.
oh.
You know, since 2000, only 3 players who are Hamler's size have had 60-plus receptions and 700-plus yards in a single season. Those players are Andrew Hawkins. I know we all have him on our rosters. Jamison Crowder, who I love, who's done it 3 times, and Cole Beasley. That's since 2000. The chances of him at his size breaking out are slim to none. But I will say, looking at the results of the survey, Hamler won, in quotes, right? More people picked him as the bust than anybody else, but it was the lowest winning percentage. So basically, when you look at this tier, everybody was picked equally. This tier is truly considered by our fantasy owners a complete dart throw. So it was actually shocking to look at the results because it was even across the board, except for Hamler, who was a little bit higher than normal. So take that for what it is. The 7th tier. Now, I feel sort of like Dante descending into the 7th, circle of hell. The rest of the 3rd round consists of Cole Kmet, who went in the 2nd round, Van Jefferson, who went in the 2nd round, Devin Duvernay, Lynn Bowden, both 3rd rounds, Antonio Gandy Golden, Devin Asiasi, who we drafted twice in our mock draft, Tyler Johnson in the 5th, and Jordan Love, who went in the 1st. Now, it's pretty hard out of this group not to vote for Asiasi, as his name literally means so-so in Spanish. His name means in Spanish. How can he not be the biggest bust? Eric, tell me why.
Well, that was a pretty compelling argument, but I'm going to go with Antonio Gandy Golden. I feel like JJ, as a Redskins fan, I've been just burned and beaten down too many times. That offense,
Brother.
I'll defend Dwayne Haskins. I think he has a lot of potential, but that offense has a chance to be really, really, really bad. And Antonio Gandy Golden has actually a decent amount of competition for that second wide receiver job. Terry McLaurin's locked in on one side, but Steven Sims Jr. and Kelvin Harmon are still hanging around, and I think will rotate in at the least a decent amount. As I mentioned earlier, Antonio Gibson's going to get some targets, I think. And there's just kind of a similar story with Joshua Kelly. Small chance at a small piece of a small pie here. Antonio Gandy-Golden also, JJ, you mentioned this the other day, really wasn't that successful at contested catches. He was slightly above average in this draft class, which he's a receiver where that's kind of supposed to be his calling card. He had some crazy impressive contested catches, but the actual success rate wasn't that high. And he struggles to separate. He struggles with kind of the other pieces of being a receiver. He played 4 years at a small school, so he's going to have a big adjustment. I just think he's a pretty risky profile.
Redskins are going to throw a crap ton because they are terrible, and he is going to start eventually, and you will see that.
I know, man.
He had the COVID. Did you see that?
Yeah. Another reason.
Yikes.
He's got
Another
coronavirus.
reason. We're still not sure your lung capacity ever comes back.
Yeah.
Von Miller said it took him like 3 weeks before he could even start
Right.
to practice. Wow, I've never heard you so right, Eric.
Oh, thank you.
Proud of you, brother. I'm proud of you. Don, your thoughts?
What an
Are you going to be oh so wrong?
Well, you'll probably tell me I am. We'll see. Why don't we investigate your
It's quite
Mr.
possible.
So-So here with a Devin Asiasi, wandering himself into a situation in which we literally have no clue who's throwing in the ball. Oh, yeah, we're told it's Jared Stidham, whoever that is. But still, unsettled quarterback situation, to say the least.
War Eagle.
Okay. Go ahead. That's nice. Now, here's the deal on him. He's only got 1 year of real college production after he transferred. He started at Michigan. Michigan, tight end central, well, except for Iowa, but still. Leaves Michigan, heads over to UCLA. All right, 1 real year of major production. Listen to the 40 time. This is somebody you want to stretch this field with. 4.73. Last I checked, not so great. He's real good about making contested catches, sure, but in a Pac-12, which is super known for defense, if you're making a bunch of contested catches, it probably means that you just couldn't outrun the coverage. So we're not exactly seeing a whole lot of explosive speed out of the guy. Yeah, okay, great. He went up for the ball. That's good. You want that in a tight end. Can't really block so good. Not really your classic inline dude. Doesn't really run so good. And isn't really big on coming out of the breaks and running that complete route tree you'd want out of your tight ends in a situation where, hey, that's kind of what they want. Maybe here going into New England, our dude out of Virginia Tech might be the guy as opposed to Mr. So-So.
Yeah, I have to say I believe more in Dalton Keene than I do in Devin So-So. But, Kmet scored the fourth worst score of the 36 players, which makes sense to me. He wasn't ranked highly pre-draft, right? I mean, we all look at pre-draft rankings. Nobody thought he'd be the first tight end to go. He has a bad QB situation. I mean, say Trubisky gets benched. You get Foles.
When
Ugh.
Trubisky gets benched.
Ugh. Foles is no better. And the last good tight end in Chicago was Zach Miller before he suffered a career-ending injury 3 years ago. So I have to say I agree with what the people, the masses have said. Cole Kmet is the biggest bust candidate out of this
I
group.
feel like
I think he's.
Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say I think he might be my favorite pick in this group, or one of the safer ones. I feel like he's gonna have a role, and
I just totally supported you.
Wow.
You know what?
now-
You badmouth KJ Hamler, and it's done.
I went and
It's on.
I went and
I
deferred
know.
to that. Oh my goodness! I feel like the Riders would kind of feel like we were remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about Jordan Love here, because we got a guy coming out of Utah State, not exactly a quarterback factory, small school, small conference, and a huge disparity in statistical numbers here. As a sophomore, now remember he came out after his junior year. As a sophomore, 32 touchdowns for 3,567 yards. As a junior, his draft year, less yards, more attempts, and only 20 TDs. Doesn't exactly scream progression here, folks. And now for a Green Bay team to take him, yeah, they're going to give him time to develop. That's a risk.
Yeah, I can't disagree. Anybody else have anything to say about this 7th tier of dart throws? Nope. So, what did we learn here tonight? I think we've all learned a lesson. But how can you use this pod to help you win leagues? Now, by knowing who the owners don't believe in, you can find the cheapest players in each tier to target. If you are Don and have this ungodly love for Zach Moss, you know that you can shoot a lower offer for him than you could for, say, A.J. Dillon. Right? You can take the confidence value because whoever drafted him because they're supposed to at that part, right? We've all done that. We've all drafted somebody because it was their turn to go in the draft, but we don't necessarily believe in them. Now, if you are Eric and love Ruggs, you know you can get him for less than Rager and Jefferson. And if you love somebody like Keyshawn Vaughn, well, shit, you're alone on that island. So, so good luck on that, because nobody loves Keyshawn Vaughn.
But to piggyback, JJ, I think to kind of answer your question, when people get a chance to listen to this, you know, we were essentially forced to look at the dark side of every player, you know, in this list and find something wrong with them, right? In some cases, it was difficult. In other cases, like Antonio Gibson, you raise the experience stat and, you know, put that just kind of in everyone's frame of reference. It doesn't necessarily mean that they'll bust, but I think knowing and getting all of the tools, all of the background, and a lot of groupthink where in the Dynasty community, whether you're talking about articles, whether you're talking about Reddit posts or on Twitter, is everyone wants their players to succeed. And you might you have blinders on in some way, shape, or form. So I think it was a good exercise just to listen. You don't have to buy into it, but it's a good idea to be able to understand where we're coming from, because it's not always starshine and rainbows over here. It said people are going to bust, and statistically it happens way more than you think.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, any final thoughts?
No, I think that covered it. The one thing I would add is it's good, too, to just know from the ADP what the tiers are. They're really helpful to use when you're moving up and down within your rookie drafts. Because maybe, you know, you don't care whether you get Dobbins, Swift, Akers, Lamb, or Judy. So, you know, target that 6th or 7th spot so you know you get one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, thoughts?
Tua Tagovailoa is not going to be a bust.
What about Jerry Jeudy?
He's not going to be a bust either.
All right. So if you wear the crimson of Alabama, you are not going to be a bust?
Just say facts. Say all facts.
Facts.
Just say it. All right, facts. So remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Rider Dynasty. Eric, where are you at?
At Eric Braunmower.
Ryan.
At the Devi Dirtbag.
Michael.
At Michael S. Kloss.
Yes, you are S. Kloss. Don is nowhere because he doesn't right now believe in Twitter. Jesus Christ. I'm at JJ Wenner. You can also check out our website for our latest articles. That's at rideordynasty.com. I've been publishing articles because I'm going a little bit crazy in my house. So thank you for tuning in. And please give us a like and a subscribe. And leave us a review. I promise, no matter what you write, I will read them all on air. Even if you say something mean about me, but especially if you say something mean about Ryan, because he crushes my bubbles, and I love bubbles. So, from all of us to all of our riders, good night and boat drinks, my friends. Boat drinks.